It started with a knock on the door, one of those knocks that doesn't feel like a neighbor saying hello, but more like someone trying to make a point. When I opened it, two men in black polos stood there, arms crossed, with HOA security stitched on their sleeves. They didn't say much, just handed me a notice and said I had 48 hours to comply. Comply with what? I live on a private lakefront ranch, miles from the nearest subdivision. I'm not even technically part of the HOA, or at least. That's what I thought. For weeks, strange things had been happening. I'd see trucks parked at the end of my driveway, drones buzzing just above the tree line. A few nights, my motion. Sensor lights flicked on, but no one was there when I checked. I thought maybe it was nosy tourists or maybe some hunters lost in the woods. But now it was clear someone was watching, and they were getting bold. The lakefront property has been in my family for generations. It's peaceful, quiet, and completely off-grid. That's exactly why I chose to live here full-time. But apparently, the HOA has different plans. They claimed my ranch was violating new community landscape standards. Never mind the fact that I'm not part of any community. They insisted their jurisdiction somehow extended to my land, and they were ready to enforce it. That's when things started to escalate. Within days, I had a crew of so-called security patrolling the edge of my property line. One even had the nerve to step onto my dock and start taking pictures. It didn't feel like a routine inspection, it felt like intimidation. And when I followed the paper trail, I uncovered something far bigger than just a nosy HOA board. They weren't after my lawn, they were after the land itself. What they didn't count on was me digging deeper. And what I found blew the whole thing wide open. Stick around, because in the next part of this story, you'll see exactly how their secret plot started to unravel, how a few simple clues turned into something they'd never expected. So I started digging. Not just through the paperwork they left at my door, but through county records, land surveys, and old emails from the previous landowners. What I found didn't make any sense. There had never been any HOA boundaries that touched my ranch, not officially. My land sits outside of the planned development zone by a clear 1.2 miles. But somehow, a new map had been filed just a few months earlier, quietly, without any public notice. And on that map, a dotted line curved around the edge of the lake. ... And now included my property. That's when I started looking into the HOA itself. At first glance, it looked like any other neighborhood board, lots of rules, a fancy logo, and a website full of smiling stock photos. But behind the scenes, the leadership had changed recently. A new president, a few unfamiliar board members, and a private contractor listed as property compliance and enforcement. That contractor, turns out, they're not just any security company. They're tied to a real estate development firm known for buying up rural land, rezoning it, and flipping it for luxury builds. The more I read, more it became clear they didn't just want to slap me with fines. They wanted the land itself. My lakefront ranch wasn't just a quiet spot anymore. It was now a prime location for the HOA's next phase of community expansion. And if they could push me out, whether through fear, pressure, or legal loopholes, they could rezone it, develop it, and cash in big. I tried reaching out to the board directly. No one would return my calls. Emails bounced. The HOA office number had a full voicemail box. It was like they didn't want to talk on the act. And with each day, their security patrols started showing up more often. One guy even had a clipboard and started writing things down while staring at my barn. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know how far they were willing to go or what exactly they were hiding behind that new map. All I had was a hunch, a few pieces of paper, and a growing sense that someone was playing a much bigger game. I decided to start documenting everything, every visit, every notice, every drone that flew overhead. I set up trail cameras along the tree line and started recording my own footage anytime someone from the HOA security team showed up. What really got me, though, was how calm and smug they acted, like they already knew how this would end. One guy even said, "You'll thank us when this place is worth triple." That's when it hit. Meath wasn't about violations. It was a land grab, plain and simple. I talked to my neighbor, Jim, who owns the last bit of land between me and the main road. He told me he'd been approached by a woman from the HOA last fall who offered to help him retire early by buying him out at a high price. He turned it down, but a few weeks later, he started getting noise complaints and fire risk warnings, despite never lighting a burn pile. It's the same pattern I was seeing: pressure first, then threats disguised as compliance issues. Meanwhile, I found an old folder in my dad's storage shed that had the original property deeds. Inside was a handwritten note from the previous landowner, something about "watch the waterline and survey markers don't lie." I didn't know what it meant at first, but when I walked the shoreline and checked the GPS coordinates, I found 2 rusted stakes half buried in the dirt, both marked in faded red paint. They didn't match the new map the HOA filed. They matched the old one. My land hadn't moved, the paperwork had. But who exactly was behind the fake expansion? And how deep did it go? The county office claimed the map update was routine, signed off by a third-party zoning consultant. I looked them up too and, surprised, they had connections to the same developer funding the HOA's latest lakefront revitalization project. The pieces were stacking up, but none of it was official enough to take to court. Not yet. All I knew was the pressure was rising. And when I caught a security vehicle parked by my back fence at 2 a.m., lights off and engine running, I realized this wasn't just about land anymore. Someone didn't want me here. That night, after spotting the vehicle by the back fence, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in the dark, lights off inside the cabin, just watching. I had my camera ready and recorded what I could, but the truck disappeared. Before I could catch the plates, I knew then whatever they were planning, it was close. This wasn't just paperwork and quiet threats anymore. Something was about to happen, and I needed to be ready for it. The next morning, I went into town to speak with an old friend of my dad's, Ray, a retired surveyor who'd helped map the lake region decades ago. I showed him the new HOA boundaries, and he immediately shook his head. "This isn't just wrong," he said. "It's deliberate." He pulled out a dusty drawer in his shop and found the original boundary maps from the county archives. What he showed me proved that my land wasn't just excluded from the HOA area. It had been legally protected from rezoning when it was first registered. That meant the new map wasn't just inaccurate, it was possibly illegal. But by the time I got back home, things had escalated again. My gate had been left open. One of my cameras was ripped clean off the post, wires hanging. And on my front porch, a letter had been taped to the door. No envelope, no signature, just a typed message. "This land isn't worth the fight. Leave quietly." That was it. No more pretending it was just misunderstandings or code enforcement. Someone wanted me out badly enough to trespass, threaten, and destroy property. But I still didn't know who was pulling the strings from behind the HOA curtain. I needed more than evidence. I needed names then. 2 nights later, it happened. Just past midnight, I heard movement by the dock. Not animals' voices. Low, muffled, careful. I grabbed my flashlight and phone, hit record, and stepped out slowly. What I saw made my heart drop. There were 3 of them, 2 in security uniforms, one in plain clothes, carrying what looked like a large rolled-up banner or tarp. They didn't see me at first, but when they did, one of them ran, and that's when I realized, this was about more than just land. I chased after the one who ran, but he disappeared into the woods before I could catch him. I got a blurry shot of the back of his jacket, no company name, just a patch I didn't recognize. When I turned back toward the dock, The other two were gone too, but they left something behind. That rolled-up tarp they were carrying. It wasn't a banner. It was a construction permit, early draft stamped with a future date and labeled Phase 3, Private Lake Marina. My dock, my land. They had already included it in their project plans. I stood there, stunned. Not only had they redrawn the boundaries, they were moving ahead like the land was already theirs. And then came the second twist at the bottom of the permit. Under the section marked Property Owner Consent was a signature. My signature, or at least a copy of it. Sloppy, not even close. But it was enough to raise alarms. Someone had forged documents to make it look like I had agreed to sell or lease out part of my land. I took the document straight to a lawyer in the next county over, the kind that deals with land disputes and property fraud. She looked at it, then at me, and said, "You're not just dealing with a rogue HOA. This is coordinated." She suspected a shell company had been created to push the land through rezoning fast, with fake owner approvals to skip red tape. Once the development started, they'd claim any resistance was just a disgruntled resident. By then, it would be too late, and that's when it hit me. This was happening to me. How many others had been pushed out before they even knew what hit them? I remembered Jim, my neighbor, and decided to check in on him. But when I got to his place,